Hey YouTube, it's my last day before spring break ends. I'm actually headed back to school tomorrow, but then since I'm all planned and I'm kind of ready to go for tomorrow, I thought that I'd spend just a couple minutes recording a video on one small change that I made in my classroom that made a really big difference with student buy-in for the student-centered learning environment. So this video is one of many videos that I plan on making for you so that you can kind of just grasp some of the things that I've been trying to do to promote student buy-in to this new way of learning. So often students look at teachers as if they should be standing up and telling them everything that they need to know. And that's really not what we should be doing at this point, especially if you're one of the states that has embraced the next generation science standards. Your students really need to work together to kind of uncover and learn the material. Of course, you're more of a guide on the side instead of the sage on the stage, as they say. So I, for many years, spent a lot of time doing the chalk and talk thing, and it wasn't only until I'd probably say about 5 or 6 years ago that I started to incorporate more guided inquiry learning into my classroom. And so naturally, you probably have heard of POGLE. POGLE stands for Process-Oriented Guided Inquiry Learning. And, I did the whole thing. I went to a lot of conferences on it, a lot of workshops where basically, the students work in these things called learning teams. And the goal of every learning team is to learn and help someone else learn. And a team is different than a group because with a team, you're working together to kind of accomplish a learning goal. So there's a whole methodology behind POGLE. If you haven't checked it out, I would definitely check it out. It's very awesome. So that was kind of my first go at trying to incorporate more student-centered learning into my classroom. So then if you kind of fast forward, I then changed jobs and moved to a new district that I was required to do essentially everything student-centered learning. I was explicitly told, at no point should you be standing up there for, 40 minutes at a clip and lecturing. So, me, I'm an overachiever, and I was like, okay, I got to find a new methodology to deliver instruction. So here we go, let's find it. So I incorporated a lot more POGLEs because that's what I was used to, because I started that way before I took this job. But then I started to kind of branch out and try some different things. So this year I'm doing stations, I'm doing unit menus, and it's been awesome. But you still always have those students that really haven't kind of embraced the student-centered learning environment. So I said, you know what, let me try something a little different. In the past, whenever I've done any kind of guided inquiry learning or team activities, the students were always grouped heterogeneously. So I've, in the beginning of the marking period, I really, at least in the beginning of the school year, you don't really know the different ability levels that you have in your classroom. And so I kind of just put the students together, and then I kind of use the first marking period to decide where ultimately they should go. And so I always grouped them heterogeneously from there on out because I had a better idea of the ability levels in my class. But then when I started to do POGLE, one of the things that they recommended that I try was incorporating homogeneous grouping. And I was so worried about doing that because I thought that by doing that, your classroom management issues would get worse. And I thought that, the lower performing students would, just continue to perform worse. And I thought that the higher performing students would be stagnant. So I was really apprehensive to do that. So then I thought, well, you know what, now's as good as time as ever, to try this out because I'm in a very progressive school district and, they welcome trying things and they welcome mistakes. And so I thought, hey, let me just try this and let me see how it goes. So I grouped my students homogeneously this year for 2 marking periods because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to be biased and just kind of do it a one and done thing. So I said, you know what, I'm going to do it for 2 marking periods. And I have to say, I absolutely love it. It's a small change that I made in my classroom, but it's really been a very cool experience because the students are a lot more embracing, I think, of the student-centered learning environment. Personally, I've been thinking a lot more about what this could be. I've been trying to reflect on it. I really think it's a result of the students feeling more comfortable with each other. I know it sounds weird, and it's not like the students are like, hey, here's my chemistry grade, but I just think the students know that they're in similar company or something, and so it makes them feel a lot more comfortable instead of sharing something and then feeling that they look stupid. They're kind of sharing a little bit more freely. So it's made a really big difference in the students in terms of how they interact with each other And then in doing so, it's also made a difference in how I interact with them, because now I feel more readily able to identify those lower achieving students, and I can spend more time with those students. And then for the higher performing students, those students are engaging in higher level thinking skills, seems to be right off the bat. But also what's kind of nice is I can kind of slip them an extra practice problem. It's like, okay, you understand how to do all this. Why don't you try this? And we're going to make this a little bit harder for you. And I have students kind of breaking off and whiteboarding. I'm able to kind of ask them more poignant questions. So it's been a really great experience. What's also really great as far as identifying the different groups of students is that you could, for example, go over to those higher performing students and say, hey, you know, I need you guys to break off into the different teams, and I need you to kind of share the knowledge that you've gained. So that's a really good thing for the students to do, especially if like they're early finishers. Typically you'll notice that, at least for me anyway, the higher performing students are early finishers, and kind of once I go over and see how they're doing, if they're all done, that's when I usually make the recommendation to kind of branch off and work with the other teams. So it's done a lot for my classroom environment. It's been able for me to, again, readily identify those students that were having, you know, difficulty, readily identify the students that kind of at the top of the class. And it's also kept the classroom management issues at a minimum. And so here's why I think that is. So it's almost like the students that are used to kind of slacking off, they can't do that anymore, because usually they're in a team of students who are also used to slacking off. So it's kind of funny because now the students are like, well, what are we going to do? We all have to work. So that's been a very cool thing to watch too. So I hope you'll consider trying some of the homogeneous grouping, and hopefully you'll see the results that I have seen. I really believe in it, and I think that this is how I'm always going to do it. One strategy that you might want to use as far as how to group your students is by looking at different assessment data. So the assessment data that I looked at were obviously, you know, tests and quizzes, things like that. Every once in a while, you know, I would kind of look at a group of students and I would say, you know, I don't know if they really would work well together, so I'm going to, you know, put this one here and this one there. But for the most part, the students are all grouped according to their different achievement levels. So those lower performing students are in one team, and then the higher performing students are in another, and they're kind of all in between. And you may ask, like, how did I do that? As I mentioned, you know, I use the data, but I just incorporated the use of Excel, and I just had the Excel essentially just sort them according to their different grades. And I just kind of took four students, and I was able to kind of separate them into their different teams off of that. It's been a really positive experience for me, and I hope that if you try it in your classroom, and I hope you do, you'll comment down below so you can let me know how it's going for you. Keep looking over here, and I can't stop looking over here. I need to look there. Okay. I just realized I wasn't wearing earrings, so now I have to. I look so bad. I look so like not put together, and it's like spring break. You just tell. It's like, oh, whatever, anything goes. Anyway, so let's try this again. And I noticed the whole time I still wasn't looking at that. Ah!